be honest, weapons in D&D are kind of boring. Or at least they were. But now, with the new 2024 edition, or 2025 at this point, we have something new to make choosing your weapon just a little bit more interesting. Weapon Masteries. Now, unlike the other features for weapons like Reach or Versatile, not everyone can use the Weapon Mastery for that particular weapon. Your wizard cannot make use of the Topple Mastery of the Quarterstaff, even if they are proficient with said Quarterstaff. So, let's discuss who can use Weapon Masteries, what they do, and some strategies for them, and some odd things I noticed about them. Weapon Masteries were developed for two reasons. To make weapons more interesting, because, let's be honest, choosing which sword you wanted to use in 5th edition was boring as dirt, and to give martial characters a bit more of a boost to match the power of the spellcasters. I don't particularly think this last part was really necessary, or at least that the power difference was really all that much of a problem, but we digress. Now, not everyone can use Weapon Masteries. Your class must have the feature to make use of them. Paladins, Rangers, and Rogues only ever get 2. Barbarians start with 2, with an additional option at levels 4 and 10. And the Fighter gets the most, starting at 3, and additional options at 4, 10, and 16. You can also take the Weapon Mastery feat, which is a half feat that gives +1 to either Dexterity or Strength, and gives you access to 1 weapon for its Weapon Mastery. But it has to be one that you're already proficient with. I should also mention that you aren't stuck with the Weapon Masteries that you choose. You can change one of them with a long rest. So, the Fighter having up to 6 Weapon Masteries isn't really all that useful. It really only comes into play if you want to be dual-wielding something like the Scimitar and the Short Sword, and then also want to have a bow as a backup. Rogues and Rangers fall into this category where it might actually be a problem. Now, remember, when you choose a Weapon Mastery, you're not choosing the mastery itself, but the weapon. You aren't choosing the Vex property so you can use any weapon with Vex willy-nilly. No, you're choosing the weapon itself. So if you choose the short bow, but you want to use the short sword as well, then you would also have to use one of your Weapon Mastery selections for that weapon. Let's start at the top and go through them. Cleave says that when you make a melee attack and hit, you can then make another attack on a creature within 5 feet of the first. Should that attack hit, you roll the weapon damage die. But you don't add your ability modifier to that damage. You can, however, add any other sources of damage, such as a Barbarian's Rage bonus. Only the Great Axe and the Halberd have this feature. Graze says that if you miss a target with a weapon attack roll, you still do damage equal to the relevant ability modifier. And the only way to increase this is to increase your ability score. So unlike Cleave, no adding that Rage bonus or anything else to this as far as I can tell. And kind of similar to Cleave, there are only 2 weapons that have this mastery, the Greatsword and the Glaive, which makes Cleave and Graze the rarest of the Weapon Masteries. The Nip property can come off as a bit confusing. Typically, when you're dual-wielding weapons, and both have the Light property, you can make an offhand attack with your bonus action. Under the same circumstances, if your offhand weapon is also a Nick weapon, you can make the attack as part of the attack action and not expend your bonus action. You can only do this once per turn. There are 4 weapons with the Nick Mastery: the Dagger, Light Hammer, the Sickle, and the Scimitar. This is excellent in your offhand, but pretty useless in your primary hand, or just as a single weapon. This is also often paired with the Vex weapons, which we'll get into in a second. Push says that when you hit a creature with the weapon, you can push that creature straight away from you up to 10 feet if they are large or smaller. There's no saving throw for this. I predict many an enemy finding themselves unwillingly ushered off cliffs and into clouds of daggers. There are 4 weapons with this mastery: the Great Club, the Pike, the Warhammer, and the Heavy Crossbow. With the Heavy Crossbow, you can now knock guards off of towers or just hit enemies from really far away and push them back 10 feet, making them waste time trying to get to you. Though I do wonder what character that gets weapon masteries would also use the Heavy Crossbow past level 4. Food for thought. Sap is very simple. You hit a creature with the weapon, their next attack against you has disadvantage if it's made before the start of your next turn. There are 6 weapons that have this mastery, a bit more than others so far. These weapons are the Mace, the Spear, the Flail, the Longsword, the Morningstar, and the Warpick. You might have noticed that all of these are one-handed weapons, which I think is meant to encourage more sword and board, which in the past was often pretty suboptimal. Having one weapon and a shield already predisposes the character to a pretty high armor class, and then giving some of their enemies disadvantage on some attack rolls against them, is going to make this iconic playstyle even harder to kill than they already were. The slow mastery lets you, when you hit a creature with a weapon and do damage to it, you reduce that creature's speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. And this reduction does not stack in the same round, so hitting the same creature with slow over and over again will not grind it to a halt. There are 7 weapons with this mastery: the club, the javelin, the light crossbow and sling, the whip, and the longbow and musket. Mostly ranged or thrown weapons here, with the exception of the club, which makes this a very strong option. The thought of shooting at something with a longbow 600 feet away and slowing its speed 10 feet every round while it struggles towards you like a 90-year-old asthmatic is terrifying. This is also one of the 2 masteries that has the caveat that you must not just hit the creature, but also do damage to it. I'm not sure how big of a deal that will be. Reducing damage to 0 through immunity and some other mechanism is pretty rare in D&D 2024, but it might become more of a thing later on. The Topple mastery might be the most balanced of the bunch. You hit a creature, and they make a Constitution saving throw. DC 8 plus ability modifier used in the attack, plus your proficiency bonus. If they fail that save, they fall prone. And remember, prone gives advantage on melee attacks against the victim, and it takes up half their movement to get up. There were only 5 weapons with this mastery, down a few from the last one. They include the quarterstaff, the battle axe for some reason, the lance, and the maul and the trident. This last one is interesting because it's kind of makes the trident a pretty versatile weapon, literally in this case. But because this mastery has a saving throw, I think it will be the least janky of the others because it has multiple fail states. And last but certainly not least, there is the Vex weapon mastery. This says that if you hit a creature and damage a target with the weapon, the next attack we make before the end of our next turn will have advantage. There are 8 weapons with this mastery, making it the most common. They include hand axe, the dart, the short bow, the rapier, the short sword, the blowgun and the hand crossbow, and the pistol. So a mix of both melee and ranged. This is the mastery that rogues are so fond of, with it helping them get advantage on attacks for their sneak attack. This one also has the damage caveat like the slow mastery. Again, could be curious to see how restrictive that will actually be. I do also wonder if the fact that the effect of this mastery doesn't come into play until your next attack, which might be your next turn, if this effect might, get forgotten. You hit, and the rest of your team takes their turn, and all the enemies go, and now it's your turn again, and you're like, what was I supposed to remember about last turn? I don't know. But on that same note, this will be used in particular with 2-weapon fighting along with weapons like the Nick property to help your offhand attack actually land, and particularly with rogues that are trying to compete with other martial characters. Well, that's all the masteries and their associated weapons. And we've talked about tactics a little bit, so let's talk about some character ideas that benefit from this new mechanic. I think we've all sussed out the dual-wielding rogue build. Scimitar with a Vex in one hand and a short sword or a dagger, and the offhand with the Nick property to ensure an extra attack while leaving our bonus action free for other things like cutting action, or if we have the dual-wielder feat, another offhand attack. This isn't to do a bunch of damage with these attacks, although that can happen, but to ensure that sneak attack gets through somehow, though it will work for dual-wielding fighters and rangers as well. I like the idea of a fighter wielding a great axe with the green flame blade cantrip. 2 enemies side by side, strike one with the green flame blade, the one beside them will take the flame damage, and then you cleave into that same enemy to do weapon damage. Combine that with the great weapon master feat. If you manage to kill one of those 2 enemies, you can then hew, which is essentially another kind of cleave, into the other. A similar character could use the pike that has the reach ability and push mastery along with booming blade cantrip to attack and push an enemy away from you, and maybe into some other hazardous spell like Cloud of Daggers. And then they have to move to get back to you, potentially setting off the booming blade. Combine that with a polearm master to make attacks as a reaction when they come too close, and it's a real party. Welcome to the party, pal! There are some interesting things there for the whip as well. That's a weapon that doesn't get a lot of love. It has both the reach and slow properties, so you can attack, slow the enemy down, and then skitter away without provoking an attack of opportunity. And unless they have a particularly fast speed, they wouldn't be able to get to you. And then you just rinse and repeat. Alright, enough spitballing. Let's talk about the composition of the weapon masteries. I'm sure you've noticed that all were not distributed equally. The Cleave and Graze masteries only have 2 weapons apiece, and they're very similar weapons. Great Axe and Great Sword and Halberd and Glaive. Yeah. And the Vex Mastery has 8 entries. Is that because Cleave and Graze are so powerful that they can't be as widespread? Or the weapons that they're associated with so weak that they need the boost of a more powerful and rare mastery? I don't think the last one is true because Great Swords and Polearms are pretty dope. That's not a surprise. In fact, these weapon masteries, though powerful, tend to be pretty situational. If you don't have 2 adjacent enemies, Cleave is useless. If your attacks are already hitting, Graze isn't adding anything extra. But some of the more common masteries like Vex or Slow are a bit simpler and they just tend to work more reliably. Now, whether that matters or not depends on your strategy, but it's something you can work around. If you're smacking someone with the whip and not trying to do any skirmish tactics with running away, then slowing them down by 10 feet won't matter much. Having said that, the vast majority of ranged weapons have either Vex or Slow, the heavy crossbow and some of the thrown weapons being exceptions. So it will usually matter. I would say it's small measures, but slowing an enemy down from range could deny them an entire turn or more of attacking your party members, so it could be huge. The truth is, I don't have any inside knowledge on why they distributed the weapon masteries as disproportionately as they did to the weapons that they did. Some of it's obvious. Cleave going to a giant axe or a giant axe on a stick makes perfect sense. But the battle axe having the topple mastery that makes you fall over, I don't know why they did that beyond the fact that getting hit with any weapon can make you fall over, sometimes permanently. But some being more present than others, I don't know. I have only suppositions. There might not be any rhyme or reason at all. I would love to read your thoughts on the matter in the comments below. While you're down there, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and smash that like button. Check out our other videos around here, and until next time, on Roleplay Culture.